Hi folks, my name is Darren Gertis. I'm a professor that's been tracking what's been going on in Ukraine since day 85. It is now day 290 since the Russians invaded Ukraine. So I'm going to go over the headlines of the day, and as I do, I generally try to look for patterns to help you understand what's going on. And before I get started, I want to propose something to you. A number of you have been with me for a long time, and some of you have even told me that you've watched every one of my videos all the way back to 85. If that's you, I'd like to know. Just tell me in the comments that that's you, if you have done that. And if you have not done that, if you're willing to do that, if you're interested in doing that, I want to meet with you sometime in January. Just like we'll create a Zoom chat where we can just meet. If there's a half dozen of us who get together to be some of the best informed people about what's going on in Ukraine, I want you to get to know each other and be able to see who's really informed. And we can talk about whatever you want, go as deep as you want about any particular topic. So if that's you and you want to pursue that, I set it out for January so that anybody who's here can now, get caught up if they haven't gotten caught up, and we'll just do it sometime out in January. Let me know if that's something that you want to do. Okay, let's get on to the news for today. So I'm going to start here, and so there's an interview with the director of Ukraine's Nobel laureate group. The group and this individual who heads it, Alexandra Matvichuk, is the head of the Kiev-based Center for Civil Liberties, and she's been documenting war crimes, and she's saying it's documenting unprecedented pain. That's exactly what it is, and there's a lot of war crimes, right? I always say we are documenting not just the violations of the Geneva and Hague Conventions, we are documenting human pain. The pain we feel when Russian troops target churches, residential buildings, hospitals, kindergartens, when they carry out forced deportations, that's separating families from families, attack evacuation routes, when the system of filtration camps is being operated, when murders, rapes, tortures, and she goes on and on. And yeah, it's bad, right? U.S. Ambassador for Global Criminal Justice, Beth Van Schlack, says, has called systemic war crimes committed in every region where Russian forces have been deployed. War crimes for Russia are not a bug, they're a feature. This is the way that Russia conducts war. So yes, there have been lots of them. In fact, there have been a whole lot of them. We'll talk about the number in just a moment. Ukraine utility crews adapt after Russian strikes. Here, part of the war crimes are knocking out power stations so that you can freeze out innocent civilians, women and children. This is not military necessity. Over the grinding wail of chainsaw pruning trees, these workers are out there repairing power lines, and they said, we too, we sit in the dark. I mean, we only get power for about half of the day. Okay, so it's pretty rough still in the cold, in the very, very freezing cold. During that barrage, 6 of the company's thermal power plants on Monday were shut down. As many as 70% of Ukraine's capital lost power. This is the barrage this past week. The plants were brought back online within 24 hours, although power cutoffs affect about 30% of Kiev's residents during the day, dropping as low as 20% at night. And so there's still a good portion that's without power. But they finished with this, and I actually absolutely love this. For the electric company crews, it's just about getting the job done. No matter what's happening around us, he said, we're just here to fix it. Like, that's their mentality. It reminds me of GIs during World War II and their idea like, well, I'm not a hero. I'm just doing my job, right? That's right. They're just doing their jobs. And they're bringing life back to where there would otherwise be death. Because without the power, a lot of people would freeze or wouldn't have water or whatever. How many of these war crimes have there been? Well, about 50,000 alleged war crimes in Ukraine. That's absolutely stunning. That is so terrible. 50,000 alleged war crimes. This is the same lady I was just talking about before, Matvichuk. She said, I started to use numbers instead of names. Like, that's how overwhelming this has been. And the rest of the article just talks about one person. The author says, I want to focus on a name instead of a number. And it's so much more powerful when you just talk about how this one person has gone through this or that or the other thing. But 50,000 of those stories are legitimate stories. War crimes are just running rampant throughout all of Ukraine. Odessa was also out of power after Russian drone attacks, say officials. Okay, but Odessa, you know where Odessa is? It's anywhere near the front line. But Putin's going, oh, well, this is a necessity. It's a military necessity. No, it's not. You're attacking civilian populations. They're not in any danger of being involved in a fight unless you bring it to them, which is what you're doing with missile attacks on civilian population, including power generation stations. Due to the scale of the damage, all users in Odessa, except critical infrastructure, have been disconnected from electricity. Okay, Ukraine says the attacks are war crimes due to their devastating effect on civilian life, while Moscow claims that they are militarily legitimate. They're not militarily legitimate. They're war crimes. CNN talks about this. Ukraine keeps patching up its power grid, but Russia's barrage could force more Ukrainians to flee as winter bites. Imagine this trying to do surgery in a condition where the power may or may not go out. What Russia cannot win on the battlefield is seeking to win by casting Ukrainian cities into the dark as long winter sets in. That's right. They're trying to freeze out the population. Monday saw the largest wave of missile attacks this past Monday. 40% of normal electricity supply was offline. They call this the electricity deficit, and it's gone down from 33 to 30 to 27, but as missile attacks come, it builds back up. Ukrainian engineers are on it as much as they can, but Russian power engineers are behind this. They know where the power generation lies because they were part of the same Russian, Ukrainian, Belarusian grid at one point, and this is what it looks like when they've hit this power generation kind of facility. Attacks on high voltage substations have been particularly damaging as they're critical for grid operation and difficult to repair. Gradually, power engineers are patching up the system. This week, the energy deficit had been cut to 19%, but the recovery is tenuous. And so that's just where we are. Okay, let me go on to the next. Let's talk about Bakhmut. What's going on in Bakhmut? This is what the city looks like, and it's quite terrible. Bakhmut and the surrounding towns for a long time. There's no living place on the land of these areas. I mean, it looks like World War I kind of like just desolate. The areas have been damaged by shells and fire, said Zelensky. Here's another article where this is Bakhmut again. And here's Zelensky talking more about it, a city of around 70,000 before the invasion, another Donbas town that the Russian army turned into a burnt ruin. He said there was no residential space that hasn't been damaged by shelling for a long time. And again, here it is burning. This is the city itself. Let me show you more about like the outskirts of the city. This video here on Twitter is Bakhmut. It's about a day ago, something like that. I'll turn the sound off. We don't need a sound. But just look how devastated the outskirts of the city of Bakhmut are. Okay, every time the Russians go anywhere, this is the kind of thing that they do. And you can tell whether somebody's the good guys or bad guys by truth. You can tell by their effects, like, are they destroying things? Are they bringing peace? Are they telling the truth? Are they involved in rapes and tortures and things? Because those are the bad guys, the ones that are doing that kind of thing. So, Christ said, by their fruits you'll know them. This is what they bring everywhere that they go in Ukraine. And so there's a reason why there's now generational hatred between Ukrainians and Russians. That wasn't like this before. And you can see it in the polling. Okay, that's enough for that for right now. This was fascinating, this particular article, because it was Vatican News, right? See this? Vatican News? Okay, look at the title. Izium, a journey through the hell of Ukraine's war. The Vatican is using that kind of language to talk about it. If the brutality of the conflict in Ukraine has a name, it's Izium, a concentration of war crimes. Here, Izium, occupied in early March and liberated in 10 September, has become the scene of torture, devastation, deportations. It's only 2 hours from Kharkiv. Here is the map. Here's Izium, right here, about 2 hours northwest of that is going to be Kharkiv. Here's Lyman, recently liberated. Lysychansk, and across the river here would be Severodonetsk. Bakhmut is down here, okay, just to give you some sense of where that is. Okay, bombings, captivity, tortures, and here's the kind of rooms that, tortures would have taken place. War crimes and evidence of rape of multiple women. Further down the room, the walls were lined with egg cartons. They were used for soundproofing, for torture. Mass graves. You had 447 bodies buried under that ground, 425 civilians, 22 soldiers. Again, when you see this kind of thing, you know who the bad guys are because they're the ones doing the evil. Right? You can see that. It's absolutely barbaric and atrocious. Okay, let me skip forward to something else. Now, this was really interesting. This is the British Ministry of Defense. They talked about Iran and Russia's cozy relationship. So I know I'm switching gears between a number of topics, but please hear me. So Iran has become one of the top defenders of Russia, and Iran is also cracking down on its own people. Now, as Iran cracks down on its own people, it's running more into Russia's arms, and so the two pariah countries are becoming more united. Now, this is a real geopolitical problem. Okay, Iran support the Russian military is likely to grow in the coming months. Okay, in return, Russia is likely offering Iran unprecedented level of military and technological support that's transforming their defense relationship. So what's Russia getting? Russia's getting more missiles. It's depleted in its stock of missiles, but what is Russia returning? That's the real issue. Russia succeeds in bringing a large number of Iranian ballistic missiles into service, it will likely use them to continue and expand its campaign of strikes against Ukraine. The worrying thing, though, this is the real problematic thing, like as if this isn't bad enough that they're getting more missiles, the worrying thing is what Iran wants, and that is nuclear technology and weapons. The language suggests that it could be part of the deal. And so arming Iran is a really, really bad idea. But this is like, it's like autocratic nations just tend to like each other. They just tend to see this, I'm going to be overpowering others in my neighborhood. And okay, anyway, now it's time for some fun with Russian state media. So here's the first article. It's an RT. France and Germany owe genocide compensation to Donbass. I'm sorry? So Berlin and Paris should pay reparations to Donbass civilians who have been suffering Ukrainian attacks since 2014, as if they didn't start the war by invading and then taking over and, putting the population up. Now, some of the population was willing, but they created this. And now what you see very often is that what the Russians do is they point at whatever their enemies are and they call them whatever they're doing. So they will have to pay compensation to the residents of Donbass for 8 years of genocide and damages. 50,000! You have 50,000 war crimes and you're talking about this? I mean, it's really unbelievable. So, but this is what the Russians tend to do, and you see it again and again if you start watching like Russian state media. I watch it on Rumble. You can see RT through Rumble. That's about the only way that I know how to get a hold of it. And you can read about it, and it's just, wow, it's absolutely amazing. Okay, next one. U.S. professor warns UN about the dangers of the West arming Ukraine. Okay, well, let's hear what he has to say. The West's military support for Kyiv has accentuated the risks of weapons falling into the wrong hands. I can't imagine how that couldn't be true. If you put more weapons out on the ground, it's possible that other people could get weapons. So far, so good. But he's not just saying that, if you have hundreds of thousands of more weapons, he's actually trying to make a case against the West arming Ukraine. And this is a Daniel Kovalak, professor of international human rights at the University of Pittsburgh School of Law. He told the UN Security Council on Friday. Well, who is this guy? The professor said that he has just spent a week in the city of Donetsk. Well, how did he get to the city of Donetsk? Donetsk is actually behind Russian lines. So that made me go, let's look him up on Wikipedia. Okay, Kovac's first book, The Plot to Scapegoat Russia. Wait a minute. Hold on a second. Wait. Kovac is a supporter of the Venezuelan government. Oh, great. Attended the Chavez Was Here gathering created by the Embassy of Venezuela. Let's look him up. What's his name of his book again? His book was called The Plot to Scapegoat Russia, How the CIA and the Deep State Have Conspired to Vilify Russia. Okay, an in-depth look at the decades-long effort to escalate hostilities with Russia and what it portends for the future. Okay, you can safely ignore this guy. He's like that colonel, the Marine colonel that I keep hearing stuff about that always comes up in RT. It will show readers two key things: the ways in which the United States has needlessly provoked Russia. Really? Especially after the collapse of the USSR, and how Americans have lost out from this missed opportunity and from the decades of conflicts based on false premises. This is exactly what Russia wants you to think about this. Okay, so I looked him up, and on RT you see 46 results. 46 results of him either writing or them citing him. And so, yeah, you can probably ignore this guy. He's not going to be worth it. All right, next. There was a guy on here commenting on the pipeline story the other day. His name is Paul Deck. Paul, thank you for your interactions. He said the pipeline story from RT is bull. There's no way, not in heaven or elsewhere to construct the pipeline to connect the European gas fields to China in this short a time period, let alone without the Western companies. You should not have given us any more time than to say that much and moved on. I appreciate what you have to say, Paul. I really do. But I didn't make it clear, and I didn't say, one, it wasn't from the European oil fields. It was from Russia into China. I didn't say that it was a project that started in 2019. Remember, I didn't go through the highlights yesterday because of the family issue. I didn't connect that. And it was on the Chinese side of the border that connected all that mileage that made it actually come together. And by the way, China is also kind of an autocratic state that can just redirect its workforce wherever it wants. Forget about how the market works. You're not going to do your job. You're going to be doing this, and then they can get things done in record time. And so I said it's not European. It's connected to China to Russia. Most of the work was done on the Chinese side. It's also an authoritarian state and such and such. And he replied, and that still leaves thousands of miles and billions of dollars to connect in the European gas networks with the Chinese. I don't care how autocratic. Both of them need Western engineering firms for this sort of work, and just to design any such thing. Sorry, I reject this unless and until a valid source confirms it. RT lies as much as their government does. Okay, that's right. It is an arm of the government, and so you have a good instinct, but it was actually a true story. RT, I said, my reply was RT regularly lies, but it's connecting to Russia, not Europe. The Chinese side is connecting to Russia at where those two countries meet, not to Europe. So, Paul, I want to say thank you for interacting with me. But here is some proof in the South China Morning Post, which is a reasonably reputable source. A 750-kilometer stretch of natural pipeline linking cities in Shandong and Jiangsu provinces, and the Russian gas can now reach China's eastern Yangtze River Delta, and this is what the pipeline looks like. And so now you're right to question me. Don't just take anything I say at face value, okay? I try to prove what I'm saying out on here, and if somebody tells you, just believe me, run away, okay? You need to see proof for yourself of what is actually going on, okay? So I very much appreciate that. So that's all that I have for today. Thank you for your time. Now, if you are going to go back and watch each of the videos, just let me know if you either have done it or you're planning to, and sometime in January, we'll get together and Zoom. We'll find a time that works for all of us, given that we're all over the world, literally all over the world, but we'll find a time. All right. Thank you for your time. Thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.